Something that I found very interesting thinking about discipline was the relationship between directionality or an outcome that discipline is being filtered through. It feels like you need something to direct your discipline toward. Without the direction, discipline is pretty hard to deploy, because what are you being disciplined in service of? What does discipline even look like? As an ex-club promoter for a long time, what was discipline to me, going out until 4 a.m, may be somebody else's idea of complete destruction.
That's true. Yeah. What is the outcome? Where are you trying to get? What's it all being directed towards? That's sort of the ultimate question. Like, practice without some aim is not really practice at all. It's just activity. So yeah, you have to figure out what it is that you're trying to do. Like for me, it was, okay, I don't want to write. That's what I want to do. So then it became clearer, like, what are the composite tasks that go into being in a position to do that? Just like, if you're like, hey, I want to run for office, okay, maybe military service would be helpful. You have to graduate from these schools. You have to cultivate this network. You have to have this. There's a resume that you need to have that job, right? And you got to know what that is. That's not to say that everyone has to do it the same way, but you got to know the sort of the collection or the portfolio of assets or tools or skills that where you want to end up. But the Stoics have this line. They go like, if you don't know what port you're sailing towards, no wind is favorable. You have to know where you want to go. And this is really true, like even for successful people. Like if you don't know where your stopping point is, what you want your life to look like, now all of a sudden, you're in this wonderful, fortunate position where people are like, hey, you want to do this? You want to do this? They're offering you this. Do you want to take this amount of money to do this or more money to do this? And if you don't know like what's important to you, what kind of work you want to do, what you want your life to look like, you end up defaulting to one of two things, like what pays most or what are other people doing? And those are not the worst proxies in the world. Like it's better than no proxy, but you can end up very far from what you actually want. And you'll only know that when you get there. So you have to have a very clear sense of like where you're trying to go, or these opportunities are, really chances to get super off track.
With that in mind, is it easier to be disciplined before success arrives?
Well, I mean, look, it's easier to say like singularly focus, or let's say it's easier to say no to stuff when you're not getting offered a lot, right? It's easy to be principled when there's not a lot in the way of consequences, right? So all these things are easier to a certain degree when you're dealing with sort of less volume or like lower stakes. I mean, one of the hard parts about being disciplined early is that you're doing this thing and the payoff may be
eating all of the shit and no
very
reward.
Far lagging indicator, So I think it's the truth is it's always difficult to be disciplined, right? It's always difficult. And it's something you have to figure out how to do and enjoy for its own sake. Because a lot of times there's not only not rewards for it, but there can be the opposite of rewards for it, right? Like there can be punishments for it. If you're like, this is what I want to do, this is the track that I'm on, this is what's important to me, and you look around and everyone's not doing those things and it seems like they're having a better time, it seems like they're getting ahead for it, right? You have to, if the only reason you're disciplined is that you think what comes on the other side of it will be worth it, not only is that going to be hard when you're not immediately getting it, but then you find like, oh, I was super disciplined until I hit the bestseller list. I was super disciplined because I won a gold medal. I was then you get that thing, and even that thing itself isn't the reward that you thought it was. So if you hated the process of it, you told yourself it'll all be worth it when, there's a disappointment there, and the accomplishment is tinged with a kind of sadness.
Was there anyone that you researched for the book that had that happen, that reached lofty heights and then their discipline fell away?
I mean, I think being disciplined once you're in the promised land it's an extremely difficult thing. I don't know. I mean, when I look at super disciplined people, again, I'm not just making the case like, okay, you got to sacrifice, so then you get this, and then you don't have to do it anymore. It's more a kind of it has to get to a kind of an intrinsic thing. I remember I was talking to Lance Armstrong once, and he said, like, I raced for the money, but I practiced for me. Some version of that like his point was like, he likes riding the bike. What they pay him for was the competition, right? And like people have obviously differing opinions about Lance Armstrong, but he's a person who clearly loved doing the thing. And you have to get to a point where you love doing the thing. That's why you do it. And like in writing, for instance, there's writing and there's publishing, and those are not the same thing. Like publishing is when it goes out into the world, and that's interacting with the publisher, and there's contracts and there's deadlines and there's press and there's good stuff, but there's also a lot that's not up to you. But like the day-to-dayness of it is you. Does that make sense?
Yes, and seeing the stuff that you maybe aren't super enamored with as part of the price that you pay, the same as getting up on time, the same as hitting your word count.
Yeah.
Douglas Murray says that once the book is published, that's when the real work begins. That's how he...
I've said it before, it's like a second marathon, and some people are not willing to run that marathon. But like I remember I heard this interview with a comedian once, and he was saying that like someone asked him like, are you still going to do comedy like once you've hit it big? Or, you know, and his point was that like, yeah, of course, because if I don't, it means that like I was doing this for the wrong reason, right? That like he was a comedian as a means to an end to do another thing, like acting or producing or, you know, having a sitcom or whatever it is. Like I like doing the thing that I do. And what you'll tend to find, this is why discipline is so important, as you get successful at something, like, you know, all of a sudden you're a Pro Bowl quarterback, or you're, you know, a CEO of a company, or you write a book. Well, now you have all these opportunities to do not that thing, right? Like people want to pay you to do other stuff, endorsements. They want to pay you to come speak here. They want you to consult on this or invest in this. And so if you don't love that thing, you're going to end up doing all those other things. Or worse, if you do love that thing, but you don't have the discipline to be like, this is what I'm here for. This is like why I did this. The reward for your discipline and your success is that you don't have the time or bandwidth to do that thing anymore.
Yes.
And you only have a limited window to do that thing, right? And so one of the things I try to go like, well, could other people, like writing is the thing that only I can do. Like only I can write the things that I have to say. So I have to figure out a life and a system and a practice where I'm filtering what I'm saying yes and no to, but I'm also like building systems or structures. So like I'm not spending a lot of time doing things that are and then I don't have time to do the hard thing, which is like sit down at the blank page.
That outsourcing of tasks that other people can do is an important one. One of the challenges, at least I'm seeing now, especially because Naval and his concept around leverage and all of that personal accountability stuff, I think people are quite quick to outsource stuff that they probably shouldn't be. I'm seeing a lot of... So, for instance, in the podcasting world would be a good example. The podcaster is the only person that understands the direction that they want to take the show in. But tons of shows that are smaller than the size of this one have guest bookers that look after all of the guests that come on.
Sure.
They have researchers that read the book and tell them the questions that they should ask. They have a thumbnail and a titling guy that comes in and demonstrates how it's visually going to look on YouTube and
sure.
And on Apple Podcasts and stuff. And you go, well, like, what are you now?
Yes.
I have a friend who did a 330-date comedy tour over many years, basically doing the same act. And he said that after the first 50 to 70 shows, he was no longer a comedian. He was an actor. And the point being that he was no longer actually
script.
doing the art of comedy. He was just a mouthpiece for what had happened before. And he had to take a big chunk of time off because he'd lost his love.
Yeah. You have to maintain the authenticity of the craft or the thing. And yeah, you do outsource and you find leverage points, but it's usually about the trivial things that don't matter.
Yes.
To free you up to spend the most time on the things that do matter. So when you're saying no to stuff, it has to be clear that that is part of a process of saying yes, 1,000% yes to like the things that really do matter. So yeah, when I outsource, if I have an assistant or someone who mows my lawn, or I'm sort of taking tasks off, that's not so I can just dick around, right? That's so I really do have the time to like sweat the details of the stuff that I make.